ᚗᚩᚾᚪᚋᚶ. Hail and welcome. I am ᚗᚩᚾᚪᚋ᚞ᚪᚷ, ᚗᚩᚣᚾᚪᚋ᚞ᚪᚔ of Woden's Earth, the Ancestral Hall. Again, coming to you from the ᚗᚩᚣᚅᚁ in ᛚᚩᚣᚁ in the West Thirding of Yorkshire. It is ᚗᚩᚣᚁ, the 7th of June, and this video that I'm doing today I'm recording ready for the ᚗᚩᚣᚁ post tomorrow. I'm going to have to crack another bottle of mead open as well next week, because that Mognac's going to be gone in a minute. Okay, introduction's over. I've said I'm going to do this for a while, but now I've got myself a new dog, as you've probably seen, and he's called Loki. So finally I'm going to have a little go at Loki for you on this post. Now, without making this post 10 weeks long, 3 hours a week, it'd be impossible to go too deeply into Loki, the character. So this is kind of a bit of an in-depth overview kind of thing. Now, first of all, I will say I do not hold blot Loki. I do not mention him at blots. The reason being is he has no equivalent in Anglo-Saxon myth or folklore that I've been able to find. Nothing solid. When I first started on this path, I had no problem with tipping a wink to Loki at all, and I still have some level of relationship with him as a deity, because I personally believe he is so important to the old northern cosmos, for want of a word. So who is Loki? Okay, so we know he's actually a fire giant. He's born of Jotun line, but there again, so are the gods. He's not one of the Asgardians, and so he is brought basically into Asgard by Woden as his blood brother. Now, as I've related to you before, I can't remember the name of the book, but I'm going to give you a load of titles of books that I've got on my Kindle and stuff at the end of this video, and I'm pretty sure it's in one of them when I first read about Loki being the one that finds Woden hanging from a tree and cuts him down from his ordeal, hence becoming blood brothers. And there's a couple of things happen here. They swapped blood, and these are quite magical beings, so it's like they become one. Okay, and there's this promise by Odin made there and then that he will never accept a drink if Loki is present without him also being offered a horn of mead at the same time. Okay, so there's a bond, and it appears for a long time that Odin really tries to defend Loki, but I actually believe he only defends him up until the point where there's no more use for him, because that's Woden. He's dark and he's fickle, and if you serve no purpose for him, then he's got no need for you, has he? Right, so when it finally comes time to cut ties with Loki, he does it without regret, but he also does it because in the North version of the cosmos, Ragnarok has to happen, and that has to be instigated by Loki, according to Snorri. Okay, so we know he's a fire giant. We know he's not an Asgardian, but as we will see, he's not the only one that's not an Asgardian that's dwelling in Asgard, but he's the only one that is put down and not accepted, and pretty much by one of the other deities in there that kind of doesn't belong, and that is Freya. Freya and Heimdall are the two that seem to hate Loki the most when you're looking into the myths and things. Loki is a deity outside the Lokian following, because there are Lokians out there, and I'm not going to profess to know their belief structure and stuff, because I'm less than interested in what they do. It's not going to be my path, so it's like good luck to them for following Loki the way that they do, whatever that is. But generally, from modern heathenry, Loki is shunned, is seen as like a dark, devious, destructive, almost a devil figure. Okay, and it does end up being this kind of figure in the Norse myths, but that's further down the line. A couple of the main reasons that he's shunned is, one, everyone will have heard of ᛚᚩᚾᚪᚋ᚞ᚪᚷ. He was the founder of ᛚᚩᚣᚪᚔ for the assembly, I believe, and in his own words, he does not allow people at blocks to toast Loki or mention Loki or honour Loki, due to his depraved sexuality. So that's why it's not compatible with ᛚᚩᚣᚪᚔ to follow Loki, although Loki's name does obviously every now and then pop up in a toast, and it's kind of overlooked, but at the end of the day it's also looked down on, and if somebody as an individual is a Lokian, that is also frowned on and looked as being quite suspicious. But okay, ᛚᚩᚾᚪᚋ᚞'s point of his depravity. He's promiscuous. People say he's homosexual, but there's no myths I recall where he's actually taking part in anything that you'd call an homosexual act. People say he's gender fluid because he can turn into an horse and give birth. That's not being gender fluid, is it? That's not a human being. Right, so that's people that want to be gender fluid that are stealing Loki as their figurehead. Because look, Loki is a magical being. He's not a human being, right? And as such, they're formless anyway. Okay, but you've also got to think, yes, he manages to transform into a horse and give birth to Sleipnir, yet he can't turn into a bird like Odin can. He has to borrow Freya's falcon cloak to be able to become a bird. So he has limitations, right? So like most of the gods and the deities, they have their own specialities, okay? But Freya and Frey are incestuous. They're incestuous with their father. They're incestuous with each other, right? And Freya is extremely free with her sexual favours to the point of prostituting herself for a shiny necklace. So if Loki's shunned for sexual depravity, why is she not? Oh, that's right, because she's the man's dream, is she? Is this what it's really about? Because she's a woman, yeah, absolute nonsense in it. And Frey, when you look at him, just over the love of a giant, yeah, through breaking the rules, he gives away his flaming sword that would have fought for the gods at Ragnarok. You know, but no one despises Frey. Heimdall absolutely hates Loki, right? Heimdall again is depraved sexually, right? The story of how the three tiers of race come into it, so the poor people, the middle class and the upper class, so that Heimdall walks the earth, he sleeps with husband and wife, he sleeps with grandma and granddad and great-grand, right, to form the class systems. He lays in between them, and he basically has sex with whatever age woman's laid next to him. So again, why is Heimdall not accused of the same sexual depravity. Why is Odin not really accused, except in ᚗᚩᚣᚁ, right, where something's slightly mentioned, but he's not actually blamed for anything, and yet when he's after the mead of poetry, he seduces a female giant, basically, for 3 nights to get what he wants. But Loki is berated for his sexuality, and to be fair, he's not much more than promiscuous, okay, except on the magical level. Okay, and then you've also got the Circle of Strata, who are kind of close affiliates to the Odinic Rite, and they themselves oppose Loki as a baleful and destructive force, and they point out there's no evidence of ancestral worship, but I'll come back to that, right, of Loki. And in the same time, they actually accept that Loki, like that his knowledge is quite illuminating, but because of his baleful and destructive tendencies, which is why they shun him. But at least that's not shunning him for the same reasons as the ᚗᚩᚣᚁ. No ancestral worship. There's not a lot of proof, is there, of ancestral worship, but we are going to come down to looking at a few myths in a moment, and there's a little clue in there that there might just have been something more than what anyone said, and we're not quite being told. So let's get into that. There's no doubt that within the ranks of heathenism, Odinism, whatever ism you want to mention, that there are Lokians within the ranks, and maybe they're practicing separately from the groups you're with when it comes to their devotion to Loki. I don't know. But there might not be this mass proof of worship of Loki, but there's certainly got to be the acceptance that if you shun Loki, if you ignore Loki, then you actually give up on the whole of the Norse version of the mythology, because there is no mythology without Loki. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at 10 myths that are so important that Loki's part of, and there's more. Right, so Asgard's walls. Right, not only is he the one that actually gets them the walls built free, okay, right, but also through his ability to restore balance when things go wrong, he also brings back to the gods some wonderful gifts. Okay, right, Skidbladnir, Gungnir, Mjolnir. Yes, it's all these gifts, all these weapons, all these fantastical things that the gods have got, all come as gifts from Loki at the end of the day. Right, so although he may have misjudged, right, but he didn't deliberately set out to let the giant win his prize for the walls of Asgard. What he saw was a genuine, well, this guy's got no chance of building this wall, so let's agree to his offer, get the walls built for no. And because obviously the giant kicks off and is furious, he's then killed within the walls, as far as I know, of Asgard, which is taboo. They're not meant to do that. That's not the only time they do it, is it? Sif's hair. Okay. Back in the days, and you can even see this in the early film, The Vikings with Kirk Douglas, right, where they've got the woman's hair pinned out, and the pissed up husband's supposed to throw axes to chop her hair off, and if you shorn the head, it's guilty of adultery. So, because he's reading between the lines in the myths that Loki's slept with pretty much all the female goddesses, right? So he's slept with Sif, and then he cuts her hair off to prove that she's been adulterous, right? But then there's also the more pagan type myth of obviously her hair representing the golden corn that's harvested. Okay, so all right, he shaves her hair off, but then under pain of threat of death from Thor himself, he actually goes and restores her hair more beauteous than it ever was, because it's now made of gold. Okay, restores the balance. Idun's apples. Okay, now there's other sexual undertones here, because Idun is actually a very innocent, childlike young lady, right? And it's kind of that representative of innocence lost. She gets taken away and locked in a cell and blah blah blah, kidnapped basically, right? And yes, it's Loki that actually gives her up, if you want, but he's already doing that on pain of death. He's been threatened, so he's agreed to it under pain of death, right? And he is then the one that restores the balance and gets her back. So yeah, he messed up, covered his own butt, but he still went at great risk to himself and restored Idun to the gods, because apples of youth are what keep the gods young and alive. Right, and you could say, yeah, because without youth, all races would end, wouldn't they? Thor's hammer, we know this one. Thor's hammer that can't be stolen, apparently, gets stolen. Loki gets the blame. Loki comes up with a plan to get it back. Balance restored. The ᚗᚩᚾᚪᛋ᚞ᚪᚷ theft for Freya's golden or amber necklace, whichever one you want to believe. She slept with the 4 dwarves of the cardinal points of the compass to acquire this. So she's prostituted herself. Let's not shun her for that, but she's prostituted herself. Basically, a little bird walking across my roof, it's the sound of it. So she's prostituted herself to get the ᚗᚩᚾᚪᚋ᚞ᚪᚔ, and it goes missing. Obviously Loki's to blame, and they finally get it back after a fight between him and Heimdall. But it's actually Odin that instructs Loki to steal it because of the way that she acquired it. Okay, so Loki, in this instance, was actually acting on the instructions of the All-Father. He can't say no. In the Rheingold story, if anybody knows the Rheingold story, it's not one that's greatly told anymore, is it? It's other myths that are more prominent, but it's basically Loki goes fishing, quite innocently kills an otter for them to eat, and turns out to be the brother of a dwarf, and oh my gosh, and now they've got to cover the otter skin in gold. So Loki goes away, he ends up getting the gold, and every bit of the skin has to be covered to pay Weigeld basically for the death of Otter. But he does it, balance restored. He's known as the father of monsters because of Hel, because of Fenrir, because of ᚗᚩᚾᚪᚋ᚞ᚪᚔ. But all these characters actually play a really, really big role in the mythologies, because without Hel, there's no underworld. She's the only goddess that Odin gives her own domain to, so she's actually quite important. Okay, Fenris is ultimately, again, Freya freaking out all the time. Why Fenris? Because she's never done anything wrong, gets chained. Tyr pays the price of losing a wrist. Okay, ᚗᚩᚾᚪᚋ᚞ᚪᚔ is thrown into the sea, and then he grows that big that he bites his own tail and holds all the seas in. So he serves a purpose. So when he rises up at Ragnarok and unbinds his tail, and all the floods, the tsunamis, whatever you want to call them, can come to where in the world for it to re-rise and grow again. So there's a purpose behind all these monsters. And Loki's other children, basically, one of them's turned into a werewolf and rips his brother to death, and his entrails are turned into the fetters that bind Loki in the cave until Ragnarok. Okay, so father of monsters, but look how his children are treated. Okay, now very quickly, there's a story called ᚗᚩᚣᚁ. Okay, I believe it translates to Loki's tail, but I could be wrong on that. But basically, an Etian, a giant, is going to take this child away, and obviously its parents, they pray to Woden, and I think it's possibly ᚗ. Anyway, there's two gods before they mention Loki they pray to try and save him from this Etian, and they both fail. So they invoke Loki, and Loki ultimately defeats the Etian, and the child is safe and is returned to his parents. That is only a small little tidbit, but is that not proof of some kind of ancestral worship? That when the chips were down, these people were willing to turn to Loki. And he didn't let them down. He saved the child. Is he going to do that for nothing? Out of goodness of his dark heart? So the snippets are there, is how you interpret them. And then obviously there's the tale of Balder and Ragnarok, which I have heavily disputed before with you. You know how I feel a little bit about Snorri's version. There's other versions out there that seem to make a little bit more sense. So when you look at all this at the moment, it's just like, I think there's a lot more to Loki that we don't know, because people tend not to look. And maybe we should be looking a bit deeper. You can probably see now why I say you could sit here forever talking about Loki, and he's such a complex character. Next to Odin himself, he's just like the most complicated character and necessary character in the whole of the mythologies. Now, he's Odin's blood brother. I've given a version of how that may have come about by him cutting down the tree. I'm not saying that's correct. I'm just saying it's something I've read. But for whatever reason, Odin brings Loki in and he makes this pledge: if I'm drinking, you're drinking if you're in that room. So although he's got a lot of use for Loki, it's ultimately Odin, sometimes with a bit of input from the gods, that decides the fate of Loki's children, and they are abused by the gods. Loki is to some extent, because he's out of his depth. He's walked away from his own race of beings to join the Asgardians, and he seems to be the only one in Asgard, whether he's an original Asgardian or not, that's not accepted there en masse. I think I've kind of said it. His non-acceptance to me seems to be led by Freya and Heimdall. They seem to be his most arch enemies in there, who are always wanting the worst for him, and at the end of the day, basically get the way in end, don't they? I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to move on to one last little bit. It's like just returning a little bit to the worship of Loki. In the modern terms, because there's very, very little, because you can look at ᚗᚩᚣᚁ, but basically It's just like the prelims of a court case being built up, and basically Loki being given enough rope to hang himself on. You know, it's that kind of feeling to it in ᚗᚩᚣᚁ. So that doesn't prove any worship of him, but it kind of gives you a lot of stuff in there where it shows his relations towards the other gods. Okay, and it also shows you that although he's not kind of seen as the alpha dog, is he? You got people like Thor, you got Odin, you got these warrior gods, right? And Loki's always the one who's not really the fighter, but is he not? If you was the only one in Asgard who wasn't accepted there, wasn't an Asgardian, would you truly want to fight one of the gods, knowing that even if you could win, they'd all be against you, so ultimately you'd lose? Right? So maybe he's just tactical, because when they're not going to let him in to his feast, he kills 2 guards quite easily. He fights at Ragnarok. So Loki can fight when he has to, but he only fights when he has to. And that's where he's cleverer than a lot of the other deities that we follow and honour. Modern worship of Loki, to me, not by all groups, but by some, has been hijacked with this gender fluidness, and Loki's trans this, and Loki's trans that, and Loki's homosexual this, and Loki's this and that. No, he's not. He's just like, I'm not saying that if you're homosexual, or if you're gender fluid, or if you're transgender, be what you want. You can follow whatever god you want. I'm not saying you can't follow Loki, but don't hijack him and pretend that he's just your god because of your aspect, yeah? Because that's just a load of nonsense. You're just rewriting the story to fit your agenda, yeah, rather than looking at the whole picture. Okay, would Loki happily accept patronage from people who are trans? Yeah, I don't think Loki's got an ism in his body, has he, or in his mind. Loki will do what is correct for Loki. But then again, Odin will do what is correct for Odin and the rest of the gods. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just run through some titles of books, because he's such an interesting character, even if at the end of it all you still think, oh, he's a bad one. You know, no one can stop you. You'll think what you want. But to me, if you're going to cast Loki down, then at least study him first and make your own decision. Don't just listen to what the people say, like McAllen. Oh no, I'm the founder of ᚗᚩᚣᚁ, so you can't mention Loki. Tell you what then, that's why I'm not ᚗᚩᚼ. Yeah, I'm not going to have somebody else dictate to me. I might as well just go to church, fall on my knees and kiss Christ's ass. Yeah, it's nonsense. Right? And this is why I don't really adhere to wanting to join the bigger organisations, because they've got their own agendas, their own ways, and good luck to that. Do what they want, but it ain't going to be for me, right? Because that's not free thinking. And if anything I know about this path is keep your freedom of thought. Okay, the trial of Loki. Okay. I think I've mentioned this before. I'm studying Nordic heathen morality, and it does actually have the Henry Adam Bellows translation at the back of ᚗᚩᚼᚁ. So if you've never read it, that's got the full translation in back, and it's a very interesting book. I've definitely mentioned this one before, I'm sure. God in Fetters, God in Flames. Or God in Flames, God in Fetters. Loki's Role in the Northern Religions by Stephen Grundy. Give your eyes burn for that, if you can see it. Okay, again, it's just a book that is just so worth reading. I believe the author is a Lokian. You know, so if I'm correct on that one, then obviously this is going from the perspective of someone who does follow Loki, so he's not going to have the biases that a lot of people have. On my Kindle, I've got loads of books, and I've revamped my old Kindle. And it's like the ones I've got are Loki. Some of them, quite a lot of them, are like stories, but they've had to do the study, and there's still pearls in there. So I've got one on order as well from Pagan Portals. If you've never heard of Pagan Portals, they do like just little kind of starter books. And I've got Odin, I've got Thor, the Loki one's popped up. I've got that. I think they even do one on Wayland the Smith, yeah, which I've not got hold of yet. So every time one of these pops up on my feeds, I normally stick it away. But I've ordered that along with the copy of the ◚ᚗᚣᚪᚋᚗᚪᚷ that we're talking to Ricky about the other week, what I mentioned on last video. But Kindle books that I already own now. So there's one called Loki Legends. Loki, 9 Naughty Tales of the Trickster, The Spawn of Loki, Monsters, I Bring the Fire, books 1 to 3, and on my Kindle, but when I was looking to see if they were still available today, there's about 7 different books now, so they just take that story further and further and further. And like I say, some of them are stories, some better than others, yeah. But there's little tidbits in there from them all, okay. Lies of Mischief is another one. Loki, Why I Began the End of the World, that's a good book. There's one called Child of Loki. I've got one on there that's just called Loki. I've also got another trilogy, I don't know if they did any more, Baldur's Tears, books 1 to 3, and it's again all about obviously the death of Baldur, Loki's supposed involvement in that, and then ◚ᚗᚪᚋᚗᚪᚷ, which again I'm pretty sure you can probably find a free PDF download of that if you don't actually have a story of that. You know, because it was a well-known myth quite a few years back. When I first heard of it, it seemed to be a well-known myth, and then it seems to be one that no one mentions. That the further down the ranks that Loki goes, these are the ones that they seem to be trying to fade out, where he does good things. Yeah. Okay then, I'm going to leave it there. That's... Oh, it's only saying 10 minutes 18 up there. That's yeah, I know why, yeah. What I've done, I've paused it a couple of times, rather than just go right, just to gather myself, yeah. So it's good. I thought I'd only been going for 10 minutes, I think that's really unusual. Anyway, I'm back at work tomorrow, so this video will go up some point in the morning. Till then, take care out there, stay safe in Woden's Keep. See you next week.